It's September 2018, the 21st, and for the people working at Telltale Games, it started like a normal Friday. The company still had games in development, and The Walking Dead, the final season, has already begun. Fans were waiting to see how Clementine's story would end, and even though Telltale had problems, most people outside the studio did not believe the company was about to disappear. Most of the studio was being shut down. Hundreds of people were losing their jobs. Projects were cancelled. But the strangest part is this: Telltale did not collapse because nobody cared about its games. People still cared. So how does the studio lose everything while people are still paying attention? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning. It's a long story, so I'll make it quick. Telltale Games was founded in 2004 by Dan Connors, Kevin Brenner, and Troy Molander, three former LucasArts developers. LucasArts had once been one of the most important companies in adventure games, with titles connected to names like Monkey Island, Grim Fandango, and Sam & Max. But by the early 2000s, the industry had changed. Adventure games were no longer seen as the future. Big publishers wanted more money, larger audience, and safer projects. When LucasArts cancelled projects like Sam & Max, Freelance Police, it felt to many fans like an entire era of adventure games was ending. And Telltale was born from that moment. The idea was to make smaller story-driven games and release them in episodes, almost like TV seasons. In the early years, Telltale built that identity through licensed projects like Sam & Max, Bone, Badlands, and Gromit, Back to the Future, and Jurassic Park. These games kept the studio alive and helped it find an audience, but they did not turn Telltale into a major name. Then came The Walking Dead. When The Walking Dead released in 2012, it changed Telltale's future almost overnight. The game did not simply retell the comic or the TV show. It created a new story inside that world, following Lee Everett as he tried to protect a young girl named Clementine during the outbreak. The Walking Dead worked because it made every choice feel personal. Even when the story had a clear direction, the game made players feel responsible for Lee, for Clementine, and for the person Lee was becoming. The emotional pressure is why the game hit so hard. The game worked because it understood something many choice-based games forgot. Players do not need 20 completely different endings to feel involved. They need choices that feel heavy and emotional in the moment. By the end of 2012, The Walking Dead had become a major success. It won Game of the Year at the Spike Video Game Awards, and Telltale won Studio of the Year. After years of trying to prove that adventure games still matter, Telltale had finally done it. But this is where the story becomes dangerous, because success does not only reward a company, it also changed what everyone expects from it. After The Walking Dead, Telltale had found a formula that worked. Famous license, emotional story, episodic release, difficult choices, and characters that players could attach themselves to. The people wanted more, and Telltale wanted to prove themselves that Walking Dead was not a one-time miracle. So the company expanded. The Wolf Among Us, Tales from the Borderlands, Game of Thrones, Minecraft Story Mode, Batman, and Guardians of the Galaxy. Telltale looked stronger than ever, but behind the scenes, the studio was struggling to keep up with its own growth. More projects meant more deadlines, more pressure, and a production cycle that never really stopped. But slowly, players began to notice the pattern. The choices still felt important, but the pattern was becoming easier to see. Telltale had also a technology problem. Its old engine helped the studio move fast at first, but over time it became outdated. Players noticed the bugs and stiff animation, and the game started to feel behind the rest of the industry. That is the part of the story that matters the most. By 2017, the warning signs became impossible to ignore. Kevin Brenner stepped down as CEO, and Pete Hawley later became the new leader of the company. Telltale wanted to change direction. The plan was to make fewer games, improve quality, and become a healthier studio. But by that point, the company was already carrying years of pressure. In November 2017, Telltale laid off around 90 employees, roughly a quarter of its staff. Publicly, it was described as restructuring. The studio was supposed to become smaller and more focused. In 2018, Telltale still looked alive from the outside, but behind the scenes, the company needed funding to survive. When that money fell through, there was nothing to left holding the studio together. That is why September 21st hit so hard. Most of Telltale's employees were laid off almost immediately. Many reportedly received no severance. Projects were cancelled and studio built emotional stories ended in one of the coldest ways possible. But the worst part was the timing. The Walking Dead, the final season, was not finished. Clementine's story had started with a game that changed Telltale forever. Now that same story almost lost its ending because the company behind it could not survive. That is the cruel irony of Telltale's collapse. Skybound later stepped in and finished the final season with members from the original team. After the closure, the company entered liquidation. Games were removed from the stores. Projects disappeared and the people who built Telltale's reputation moved on. Then in 2019, the name came back. LCG Entertainment bought key assets, trademarks, technology, and selected IP from the old company. A new studio would operate under the Telltale name. And now in 2026, the question is simple. Did Telltale recover? Not fully. The new Telltale is alive, but it has not returned to what the old studio once was. And not to forget, The Wolf Among Us 2 has announced. So for the people who played the first part, it's a really big announcement. So be hyped, and if you enjoyed the video, a like and a subscription would be greatly appreciated. These videos takes a lot of time, so every bit of support helps me more than you think. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.